I don't have a thing to wear. Have those words ever come from your lips? Well, if so, stay tuned for Bible study number 153, Beyond Fashion. Hi, this is Pastor Mark Pierce with Church Requel, and I'm here again in Deer Park, just south of my home in Mansfield, Ohio. And I'm here to share a Bible study with you on this Monday, June the 17th, from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6. So if you take your Bible, turn to Matthew 6, and we'll read verses, let's see. Just make sure I got the right ones here. Let's pick it up with verse, let's see here, 27, I think that was where we want to go. Verse 27, "And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith?" Well, before we get into the things that Jesus is saying here, let's make sure that we're really clear about the one thing that Jesus is not talking about here. He's not talking about anxiety disorders. And I think, especially as pastors and those of us in the church, that it's really important that we be sensitive to the fact that there are very real and very physical disorders that have the symptoms of anxiety. Panic disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, along with other social and specific phobias that are caused by some kind of brain dysfunction. For these and other types of mental health diseases, we really should be sensitive. I always advise people to seek medical attention, medication, and certainly we should be praying for the healing of these physical diseases, just like we would any other kind of disease. I think, however, that Jesus here is not talking about that type of thing. He's talking about the kind of anxiety that is created by our own worry, which in turn is created by two things. First of all, treasuring the wrong things. Remember, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about treasuring the right treasure. And if we're treasuring the wrong things, we're going to tend to be anxious. And then secondly, not trusting God to take care of us. What we talked about on Friday. See, being worried about what we will eat or drink or what we will wear. If I were to put this in terms that we would all understand in today's economy, it would be an easy matter to worry about those things that we just don't have control over, like whether or not we lose or keep our job, whether the plant stays open, whether our employer does well or not, whether we can pay for things next year, whether that retirement plan stays good. I mean, these are all things that can just completely overwhelm us and cause us to worry. Jesus gives us 5 different statements of advice in these short verses. First of all, he tells us that it's just not logical to be anxious and to worry. Who, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his lifespan? Well, that's obvious, right? I mean, the answer is no one can. Nobody can add a single moment to their life by worrying. Not a single person has control over his or her own life. In fact, if anything, science tells us that anxiety and then all of its resulting manifestations are likely to kill us sooner rather than later. So by being anxious, our lifespan tends to be shorter, not longer. So by being anxious, we don't add to our life at all. Secondly, Jesus tells us that we're anxious over the wrong things. I mean, clothing, really? Now, often I think it's easy for us when we look at this verse to think, well, people in Jesus' day were actually worried about whether or not they had clothes or not. Well, certainly there might have been some of the very poor, but that's really not, I don't think, what Jesus is getting at. People in Jesus' day, just like in our day, were worried over whether or not that they would have clothes, but that they would have the right kind of clothing. You see, clothing has always provided a fashion sense and a pecking order. People would dress to their station in life. You certainly heard the words dress for success. Well, if you can't dress in a certain way, then life just won't be as sweet. And Jesus is saying, hey, is that really true? Let's stop and think about it for a moment. For God the Father who looks at you and who loves you, does it really matter, do you think, the kind of clothing that you wear? In fact, this leads us to the third thing that Jesus is telling us, and that is that God's own fashion sense is utterly perfect. Jesus tells us that not even Solomon was arrayed like the lilies in the field. Now, boy, here it's really easy to miss a point. You see, it's not that Solomon didn't have the finest clothes. He did. And it's not that he didn't have better clothes than anyone else within earshot of Solomon or of Jesus, including Jesus himself. Because Solomon did have better clothes than anyone else. And it wasn't as if Solomon wasn't arrayed more magnificently to the human eye, because he was. The point is this: how did he look to God? We should be a whole lot more concerned about how God sees beauty and how he sees beauty in us than how other people see beauty. Because God's fashion sense is perfect. And that leads us to the fourth statement that Jesus gives us, and that is that God does value you more. With today's societal concerns of global warming and environmental concerns and earth first kind of thinking, it's worth remembering that Jesus is very clear here that God does value his creation of man and woman more than anything else. Jesus reminds us, will God not much more clothe you? And then that leads us to the fifth statement that Jesus gives us, and that is, where is our faith? Where's your faith? Where's my faith? General anxiousness, not an anxiety disorder, but general anxiousness is a matter of worrying about the wrong things because we treasure the wrong things and because we don't trust God to value us enough to care for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we just sit back and that we do nothing. Faith in action means that we look to God for him to give us direction, to inspire us, to think, to act, to plan, to work, to accomplish. But all of these things are all coming from the seed of faith and confidence that even the idea of how to best care for ourselves came first from God because of his great love for us. Hey, thanks for joining me today on this Monday. I'm going to be back with you again on Wednesday in our Bible study on Wednesday, the first one in July. Today's the last one in June. First one in July, number 154, our highest priority. Make sure you come back. I look forward to seeing you then.